It happened one Sunday afternoon. The family gathered for our usual backyard barbecue. The smell of grilled burgers, sweet corn, and apple pie filled the air. I was sitting near the patio table, watching my grandson Luke run around with his little toy truck. His cheeks were red, his laughter echoed across the yard. I had slipped a piece of candy into my pocket earlier. Just a simple peppermint, the kind I've always loved since I was a child myself. When Luke came running to me panting and smiling, I reached into my pocket and handed him the candy. "Here, sweetheart," I said. "Just one treat for being Grandma's helper." He took it with both hands, his eyes sparkling with joy. He tore the wrapper, placed it in his mouth, and hugged me tight. But then her voice cut through the air. Fallon, my daughter-in-law, stood at the grill, her face tight with anger. She shouted across the yard in front of everyone, "Don't give him candy, Eleanor. You'll spoil him. You'll ruin everything I'm teaching him." The laughter stopped. The yard grew silent. Even the birds seemed to pause in the trees overhead. I froze my hand, still resting on my grandson's shoulder. I hadn't expected her voice to sound so sharp, like a knife cutting through the Sunday peace. Luke looked up at me, confused, his small mouth still sweet with the peppermint. The neighbors who had dropped by with potato salad shifted uncomfortably. My son Marcus looked down at his plate of ribs, saying nothing. And me, I felt the sting of being called out like a misbehaving child, even though I was the grandmother. My chest tightened. For a moment, I forgot the taste of food, the smell of barbecue smoke. All I felt was shame burning in my face. I thought of all the Sundays before, when I stood at this same grill cooking for Marcus when he was Luke's age. Back then, it was me handing out popsicles, me setting extra marshmallows on the campfire sticks. Back then, nobody told me I was ruining my own child. But here I was, 68 years old, being scolded like I had done something terrible. Fallon's words rang out again, sharper. "This time you'll make him hyper. He'll never listen to me if you keep doing this." I opened my mouth to reply, but the words stuck. I swallowed hard. I saw Marcus avoid my eyes. I saw the neighbors whisper. And I felt for the first time like a guest in my own family. That one peppermint candy had turned into a crime. That one small gesture of love had turned me into the villain. And in that moment, I realized maybe this wasn't just about candy. Maybe it was about something deeper. If you've ever felt like your love was mistaken for weakness, stay with me, because this story is only just beginning. My name is Eleanor Hayes. I'm 68 years old. I live in Dallas County, Texas. It's not a fancy place, but it's home. A single-story brick house with a front porch swing and a yard full of roses I've planted over the years. I bought this house when Marcus was 12. Back then, I worked 2 jobs, one at the public library and another cleaning offices downtown at night. Every dollar I saved went into this home. It was our safe place, our shelter from storms, both weather and life. Now, years later, I share this space with Marcus, his wife Fallon, and my grandson Luke. Marcus is 38. He works long hours at a car dealership. He sells trucks and soothes the kind Texans love for hauling trailers and weekend camping trips. Fallon stays home with Luke. She's organized, she likes things neat. Everything in labeled bin schedules, written on calendars, rules printed on the fridge. Luke is 5. He loves dinosaurs, chocolate milk, and playing tag in the yard. He's the light of my life. Every morning I hear his footsteps running down the hall. He calls out, "Grandma, I'm hungry," and I make him pancakes with blueberries and maple syrup. Sometimes when Fallon sees the syrup bottle, she frowns, reminding me that sugar isn't good. But I remember when Marcus was Luke's age, I made pancakes the same way. And he grew up just fine. Life in Texas has always been about balance. Hot summers, cold, sweet tea, church on Sundays, and family barbecues in the backyard. I thought those barbecues would be my happiest days. But lately I find myself sitting at the far end of the table, quiet, while Fallon tells Marcus what I should or shouldn't do. Sometimes I wonder, this house is even mine anymore. The mortgage was paid off 15 years ago, yet I feel like a visitor in the home I built. Neighbors drop by often. Dorothy from across the street brings peach cobbler or sweet iced tea. She always calls me Miss Eleanor, even though we've been friends for 20 years. She once whispered to me, "Your daughter-in-law has a sharp tongue." I smiled, pretending not to notice. I don't like gossip. But I do feel the sting of Fallon's words, especially when Marcus stays silent. I've always believed that a mother's job is never truly done. Even when your children are grown, you keep giving advice, comfort, support, whatever they need. But sometimes it feels like giving turns into interfering, at least in Fallon's eyes. Still, I remind myself I raised Marcus with love. I raised him with discipline, yes, but also with kindness. And I believe that love doesn't spoil a child. That's who I am. A mother, a grandmother, a woman who's lived through both storms and sunshine. I tell myself I'm strong enough to handle a sharp word or two. But when the words come at the Sunday table, loud accusing in front of neighbors and friends, it cuts deeper than anyone can imagine. Because behind my quiet smile, I carry a lifetime of sacrifice and love. And all I want at 68 years old, living in Texas with a house full of memories, is to be seen not as a burden, but as the heart of this family. I still remember the early years. Marcus was just a boy, barely 12, when his father passed away. I became mother and father all in one. There was no choice, only survival. I worked at the library by day, stacking shelves, answering questions, helping kids with their school projects. At night, I took the bus downtown carrying a small lunchbox to clean offices on the 15th floor. Vacuuming carpets, emptying trash bins, polishing glass doors until my hands ached. I came home past midnight, feet swollen, back sore, but my heart still steady, because Marcus was sleeping safe in the next room. That was enough for me. On Saturdays, I'd save a few dollars to take him to the diner on Main Street. We'd order pancakes and bacon, he'd pour too much maple syrup, and I'd laugh pretending I wasn't worried about next month's bills. I never bought new clothes for myself. Every extra penny went to Marcus, his school supplies, his baseball glove, a second-hand bike from a yard sale down the road. I remember sewing patches on his jeans by the dim kitchen light. The hum of the fridge, the smell of laundry soap, and my hands trembling with fatigue. But when Marcus came home with good grades or when he hit a home run, the tiredness melted away. That was my reward. Years later, when he was accepted into college, I cried so hard I couldn't even finish folding the laundry. All those nights scrubbing floors, all those mornings, riding the bus, all those sacrifices, they had built a future for him. I thought my role was clear. I was the builder, the foundation, the one who gave so he could rise. And in return, I believed I'd grow old with respect surrounded by gratitude. But sitting at the barbecue table, now hearing Fallon's sharp voice, watching Marcus lower his eyes, I can't help but wonder, did all those nights matter? Did anyone notice the way my hands cracked from cleaning chemicals, the way I skipped meals so Marcus could eat? Sometimes I look at my reflection, the lines on my face, the silver in my hair. Each wrinkle feels like a record of one more sacrifice. But sacrifices don't always shine. Sometimes they fade like old ink on paper. And the people you gave them for, they forget. Luke doesn't know yet. He's too young. To him, I'm just grandma, the one who sneaks him candy, the one who makes pancakes with blueberries on Saturday mornings. Maybe one day he'll learn my story. Maybe one day he'll understand that love sometimes means going without. Until then, I keep quiet. But inside, I carry decades of memories. Memories of sacrifice, of nights without sleep, of mornings without breakfast. And I wonder as I sit in this Texas home, does Fallon know any of it? Does Marcus remember? Or am I just the old woman at the end of the table, handing out peppermint candy, still being told I'm spoiling the child? It didn't stop with the candy. That Sunday was only the start. Fallon began watching me closely. Every small thing I did turned into a problem. If I gave Luke a cookie, she'd frown. If I let him stay up an extra 15 minutes, she'd sigh loudly. Once I picked him up from preschool on my way home. I buckled him in, stopped at the park, and let him play for half an hour. When we got home, Fallon stood at the door. Her arms crossed, her voice sharp. "You can't just do that, Eleanor. I have routines for him. You're messing everything up." I bit my lip. I wanted to explain that a little sunlight, a little laughter never ruined a child. But Marcus was standing behind her keys in his hand, fresh from work. He looked at me, then looked away. "Mom, maybe just call next time," he muttered. And that was all. I swallowed my words. I smiled at Luke, who clung to my hand, still smelling of playground dust. But inside, the sting grew stronger. At dinner that week, the tension spilled over again. I had made roast chicken, mashed potatoes, and green beans with butter. It was the way my mother cooked, the way Marcus grew up eating. Luke grabbed a second helping. He smiled, wide potatoes on his cheeks. And then Fallon said it in front of everyone. "See, this is why he eats too much. Too much butter, too much salt. I've told you, Eleanor, this isn't healthy." The fork froze in my hand. The table went quiet. Even Luke's chewing slowed. I glanced at Marcus. He cleared his throat, shifted in his chair, and said nothing. So I put my fork down. I folded my napkin. And I nodded politely, like a student being corrected. But my heart sank. Because in that moment, I wasn't a mother anymore. I wasn't a grandmother. I wasn't the woman who raised this family through storm and sacrifice. I was just wrong. Always wrong. Later that night, I stood in the kitchen alone. The sink full of dishes, the smell of roasted chicken still hanging in the air. I thought of all the meals I had cooked for Marcus. The nights he begged for seconds, the way he licked the gravy off his plate. Nobody told me then that I was doing it wrong. Nobody told me I was ruining my child. But now in my own home, I was treated like an intruder in the kitchen. It was a quiet kind of pain. Not the kind that makes you cry out, but the kind that settles deep and lingers long after the table is cleared. And every time Fallon spoke sharply, every time Marcus stayed silent, a little part of me felt erased. I didn't want to fight. I only wanted peace. But conflict kept finding me, even in the smallest things. One peppermint, one trip to the park, one spoonful of mashed potatoes. And suddenly I was the problem. Me, the woman who had given everything. It happened on another Sunday. The air was heavy, smelling of barbecue smoke and fresh-cut grass. Family sat around the patio table, plates of burgers and coleslaw in front of us. Luke was running barefoot, chasing bubbles across the yard. His laughter rose above the hum of cicadas in the trees. I reached for the potato salad. I scooped a spoonful onto Luke's plate. Before I could set the spoon down, Fallon's voice struck again. "Eleanor, don't give him that. It's loaded with mayonnaise. Do you want him sick?" The table went silent. Marcus shifted in his chair, eyes on his drink. I felt the heat rise in my face. Something inside me snapped. I set the spoon down firmly. My hands trembled, but my voice came out clear. "Fallon, stop talking to me like I'm a stranger. I am Luke's grandmother. I raised Marcus with love. And he turned out just fine." Her eyes narrowed. The corner of her mouth tightened. "You don't understand, Eleanor. You're old-fashioned. Kids need structure, not candy and comfort food. You're undoing everything I teach him. I leaned forward. My voice shook, but it grew stronger. I have kept quiet too long. I worked 2 jobs day and night so Marcus could have this life. I sacrificed years of myself to make sure he had a future. And now you're telling me I can't even give my grandson a spoonful of potato salad. The neighbors stared, forks frozen midair. Marcus rubbed his forehead, still silent. Fallon crossed her arms. You always make this about you. This isn't about your past, Eleanor. This is about Luke. And I'm his mother. The words stung sharp as broken glass. But I didn't back down. I know you're his mother. And I respect that. But I am his grandmother. I am family too. And love doesn't ruin a child. Neglect does. Luke, sensing the tension, ran over. He tugged at my arm. Grandma, don't be sad, he whispered. I held him close, my heart breaking and healing at once. For a moment, the yard was silent again. The only sound was the wind in the oak trees. Marcus finally spoke. Mom, Fallon, maybe we should just eat. His voice was low, uneasy. But it wasn't enough, because the damage was already done. The lines were drawn. I had broken my silence. I had stood up even if my hands shook. And though Fallon's glare burned into me, I felt something different rising inside. Not shame, not regret, but the fragile beginning of dignity. The silence didn't last. It shattered like glass. Fallon slammed her fork down. The sound echoed across the patio table. Eleanor, you just don't get it. You raised Marcus your way, but times are different now. Your way is outdated, and it's dangerous. Her words cut like a knife. Dangerous. She had called me dangerous. I looked around the table. Neighbors frozen. Marcus staring at his plate. Luke wide-eyed, clutching my hand. I tried to steady my breath. But Fallon pressed harder. You keep feeding him sugar. You keep letting him break rules. If something happens to him, that's on you, Eleanor. You'll be the one to blame. Blame. That word stung worse than anything before. I pushed my chair back slowly. My knees shook as I stood. I placed my hand on the wooden table, the same table I once sanded and painted myself years ago, when Marcus was still a boy. Blame me, I said softly. Do you know what blame is? Blame is when your husband dies young and you have to raise a child alone. Blame is when you work nights scrubbing floors until your back nearly breaks. Blame is when you go hungry so your son can eat. My voice cracked. But I didn't stop. And now, after all that, you want to blame me for giving my grandson a peppermint, for giving him love. Fallon's face flushed red. Her lips tightened, but she fired back. You're twisting this. You think sacrifice makes you right. It doesn't. This is my house now. My rules. And you need to respect that. My chest tightened. Her house, the words hit me like a blow. I whispered, this house was bought with my hands. Paid off with my work. Every brick, every shingle, every light bill came from me. Fallon didn't flinch. She crossed her arms. Well, it doesn't matter now. You're just living here because Marcus lets you. My knees nearly buckled. The neighbors gasped. Marcus closed his eyes, silent still. Luke wrapped his arms around my waist. Grandma, don't cry, he whispered. I stroked his hair, but my tears came anyway. Not loud, not messy, just silent drops falling onto his little shirt. The air grew heavy. Even the cicadas outside seemed to quiet. For the first time, I saw it clearly. This wasn't about candy. This wasn't about food. This was about pushing me out of decisions, out of the home, out of the family I had built. And in that moment, The hurt turned into fire. I straightened my shoulders. I looked Fallon in the eye. I may be old. I may not follow every modern rulebook, but I am not invisible, and I will not be erased from my own family. The words hung in the air, sharp, unshakable. Everyone at the table knew the storm had arrived. There was no going back. The storm hung heavy in the air. No one moved. No one spoke. I stood trembling, Luke clinging to my side, Fallon's glare burning through me. And then a voice came from the corner. It was Dorothy, my neighbor from across the street. She had brought peach cobbler earlier and stayed for dinner. Her hands were folded neatly in her lap. Her voice was calm but steady. "Fallon," she said gently, "I've lived across from Eleanor for over 20 years. I've watched her raise Marcus. I've seen her walk to the bus stop in the dark mornings. I've seen her come home after midnight carrying work shoes so worn they had holes in the soles." The table stayed silent. Even Fallon blinked, surprised by Dorothy's words. Dorothy continued, her eyes fixed on Fallon. She didn't ruin Marcus. She raised him. She raised him with strength and sacrifice and more love than most people can even imagine. Marcus shifted in his chair, his jaw tightening. He still didn't speak, but his eyes glistened. Dorothy leaned closer, her tone sharper now. "You may not like the candy or the extra butter, but don't mistake those things for weakness. They're love. They're memories. And they're part of why this family even exists." Fallon's lips parted, but no words came out. The red in her cheeks deepened. Dorothy looked at me then. Her voice softened. "Eleanor, you deserve respect. Not just for what you've done, but for who you are." The weight of her words fell over the table. Neighbors nodded quietly. Even Luke looked up, confused but curious. And then from the smallest voice of all, Luke whispered, "Mommy, Grandma makes me happy. She tells me stories at night. She makes me laugh. I love Grandma." The innocence in his voice cut sharper than anger ever could. Fallon froze. Her eyes darted to Marcus, then back to me. Her arms lowered slowly. I stood still, tears brimming, but my back straighter than it had been all night. Because in that moment, I wasn't alone. Dorothy's words, Luke's love, they stood beside me. The table felt different now. Not safe yet, not peaceful, but shifted. Like the ground after a storm begins to break. Marcus finally cleared his throat, his voice low, uneasy. "Fallon, maybe Dorothy's right. Maybe Mom deserves more credit. We wouldn't be here if it weren't for her." His words were halting, but they were enough. Enough to crack the wall of silence. I closed my eyes, letting the moment sink in. For the first time in years, I felt someone else stand up for me. The confrontation wasn't over. The storm wasn't gone. But a light had pierced it. A voice had spoken truth. And truth has a way of changing everything. The table sat heavy in silence. Dorothy's words lingered. Luke's voice still echoed. Fallon's face tightened. Her jaw clenched. Her hands twisted in her lap. And then Marcus spoke again. "Fallon, maybe Mom isn't the problem. Maybe we are." It was the first time I had heard my son take my side in years. Fallon's eyes widened. Her voice shook. "So you're saying this is my fault? You know why I get upset, Marcus. You know what's at stake?" "What's at stake?" I asked softly. The question slipped out before I could stop it. Fallon froze. She glanced at Marcus, then down at her hands. The air thickened. Neighbors leaned closer, sensing something unsaid. Finally, Fallon exhaled sharply. "Fine. You want to know it's not just about candy, Eleanor. It's about control. It's about this house." My chest tightened. This house. I whispered. Fallon nodded. Her words came fast now, as if a dam had broken. Yes. Sis? Marcus and I want to refinance. We need to update the kitchen, fix the roof, get rid of the old mortgage terms. But the deed is still in your name. You hold everything up. The world seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. All those sharp words, all those fights. It wasn't about candy. It wasn't about rules. It was about the house. The home I built with my bare hands. Dorothy gasped softly. The neighbors whispered. Even Luke looked confused. Fallon's voice grew harsher. If you just sign it over, we could move forward. But you keep clinging to it like you're the only one who matters here. My throat tightened. Tears stung my eyes. This house is not just walls and wood and shingles, I said. This house is my life. Every late night cleaning floors. Every bus ride in the dark. Every sacrifice. It's written in these walls. Fallon shook her head. You're selfish, Eleanor. You say it's about love, but it's really about control. You don't want to let go. Control. That word echoed. It twisted in my chest. I looked at Marcus. My only son. The boy I once carried on my shoulders to the 4th of July parade. The boy I once rocked to sleep during Texas thunderstorms. Is this true? I whispered. Do you want me gone? His lips parted. No words came out. But his silence was louder than Fallon's shouts. My knees felt weak. The world blurred for a moment. Not from age, not from exhaustion, but from heartbreak. The truth was out now. The candy, the food, the routines. None of it mattered. The real fight was over my place. Not just in this house, but in this family. And in that moment, I knew I wasn't just fighting for respect. I was fighting not to be erased. The truth hung in the air. Heavy. Unshakable. Fallon's words circled my mind sign over the house. Let go. Disappear. For a moment, I thought my knees would give out beneath me. But then Luke's small hand slipped into mine. Grandma, he whispered, don't be sad. I love you. That little voice steadied me more than anything else could. I sat back down slowly, my heart still pounding, but my spine straighter. I looked at Fallon. I looked at Marcus. And then I spoke, not shaking now, but calm. This house, it is more than property. It's the story of my life. The story of raising a boy alone. The story of every sacrifice that built this family. Fallon opened her mouth, but I raised my hand. Firm. Clear. I won't argue anymore. I won't yell. But I will not be erased. Not from this home. Not from this family. Dorothy reached over, patting my shoulder gently. Her presence reminded me that I wasn't alone. Marcus finally looked at me. His voice cracked. Mom, I didn't know Fallon would say it like that. I just wanted things easier. I never meant to hurt you. I studied his face. My son. The man I raised. The boy who once held my hand crossing Main Street. My voice softened. Marcus, all I ever wanted was for you to be happy. But happiness built on forgetting the people who carried you, that is no happiness at all. He swallowed hard. His eyes wet. But for once, he didn't look away. The yard was quiet. Only the cicadas sang. Fallon pressed her lips tight, but she said nothing more. I turned to Luke, still clutching my hand. I brushed his hair back. You sweetheart, you are my joy. And no one can take that love away. His little arms wrapped tight around my waist. The warmth of his hug melted some of the ache in my chest. I breathed deep. The evening sun painted the sky orange, casting long shadows across the yard. And in that golden light, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not victory, not triumph, but peace. Peace in knowing I had spoken my truth. Peace in knowing that my dignity was intact. Peace in realizing that love, the love of a child, the love of a life lived fully, could not be erased by signatures on paper. I stood, my voice steady now. I'm not leaving this house. Not today. Not tomorrow. If one day I go, it will be by choice. Not because I was pushed out. Not because love was mistaken for weakness. The words floated through the warm air. Strong. Unshaken. And in that moment, though, Fallon's silence lingered, though Marcus still wrestled with guilt, I felt lighter. Because I had chosen peace over fear. The summer sun had nearly set. Shadows stretched long across the backyard. But the weight in my chest felt lighter. For the first time in years, I had spoken my truth. Fallon sat stiff, her arms crossed, her eyes sharp. But her power had shifted. The neighbors had heard. Marcus had listened. And Luke still held on to me. Days turned into weeks. The air of the house changed. Not soft, not perfect, but different. Marcus began checking in more. "Mom, you okay?" he'd ask, standing at the kitchen door with his car keys in hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. Fallon grew quieter. She didn't snap as often, but her eyes carried fire. I knew she hadn't forgotten what she wanted: the deed, the house, the control. One morning, a letter came in the mail. It was from the county office. Fallon had tried to file papers to refinance the house without my consent, but the papers bounced back. The deed was mine. My name alone. Her plan exposed. Marcus held the letter, reading every line. His face flushed red. "Fallon, how could you? You went behind my back, behind Mom's back." Fallon stammered, her voice brittle. "I just wanted us to move forward. You know she'll never let go. We needed this." But Marcus shook his head. "No, we didn't need this. You did. And you lied about it. The fight that followed wasn't mine to fight. It was Marcus's. For once, my son defended me. Not with silence, but with anger. The neighbors found out. Dorothy told the church ladies. And soon Fallon's sharp whispers turned against her. She stopped coming to the Sunday barbecues. Stopped sitting at the table. Her absence was louder than her presence had ever been. And me, I found peace in the quiet. Luke still came running every morning barefoot on the wood floors, shouting, "Grandma, I'm hungry." I made him pancakes with blueberries with maple syrup, just like always. And this time, nobody stopped me. Fallon tried again once more. She threatened lawyers. She raised her voice. But Marcus stood firm. "This is Mom's house," he said, his voice steady. "If you can't respect that, then maybe you don't belong here." Her power crumbled. Her anger backfired. And slowly, she was the one left outside, not me. Peace didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. Like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. One evening, I sat on the porch swing. The Texas air was warm. Cicadas sang in the oak trees. Luke climbed onto my lap, resting his head on my shoulder. "Grandma," he whispered, "don't ever leave. I need you here." Tears filled my eyes. Not from pain, but from joy. Because I knew I wouldn't be erased. Not from his life. Not from this family. Marcus stepped outside, hands in his pockets. "Mom," he said softly, "I should have stood up sooner. I should have remembered everything you gave. I'm sorry." I looked at him, the boy I raised, the man he became. And I smiled. "Marcus, you don't need to be sorry. You just need to remember. Remember who you are. Remember where you came from. And remember, family isn't about control. It's about respect. He nodded, his eyes wet. For the first time, I felt like my son truly saw me again. And so the house remained mine. The kitchen, the living room, the old wooden table that had seen so many storms. Fallon's voice no longer ruled. Her sharp words, her cold glares faded into the background. Because truth had spoken. Because love had endured. Because dignity once reclaimed does not fade again. The ending was not perfect. Life never is. But it was enough. Enough for me to breathe easy. Enough for me to rock on the porch, swing grandson in my arms, sunset on the horizon. And in that peace, I found my message. To every son, to every daughter, to every family. Respect your elders. Honor the sacrifices that built your life. Don't wait until they're gone to realize their worth, because one day you'll be in their place. And you'll pray that love is remembered. If your mother, your grandmother, your elder stood in my shoes, how would you treat her? Would you silence her, push her aside, erase her name from the home she built? Or would you hold her hand, thank her for the years she gave away, and let her know she is still the heart of your family? The choice, dear listener, is yours. And as you think on that, remember, this love never spoils a child, but forgetting love that ruins a family. If this story has touched your heart, stay with me. Because there are more stories, more truths, more voices that must be heard. You can subscribe so we'll never lose each other in the noise of the world. And maybe, just maybe, you'll carry this question into your own home tonight. If you were me, what would you do when your daughter-in-law treats you with no respect?